Welcome back. All right, so talking today about wrestling or wrestling. AEW. Yesterday, All Out. I didn't end up ordering it. I don't regret not ordering it. Really, it's the amount of time and the amount of matches, and of course, there's been a lot of talk about how the build wasn't where you want it to be. There are things in AEW that could get better, and there are things in AEW that really should get better, right? And booking is something that I will agree with people that they have hit and miss with. Part of the reason I think that AEW has this problem is you have too many guys who should be main eventers. One thing when they kept adding WWE guys as they were being released, whether it was Miro, whether it was Malachi Black, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, I was like, okay, who's going to be at the top of this card? Because a lot of these guys look like they should be at the top of the card. And so that's the issue I had with it at the time. When you have that many egos in a locker room, I would imagine it's tough for Tony Khan, who's kind of still learning the job as it goes, right? Tony Khan, who is in charge of everything, I think the company would probably do better to have somebody else too that's running the day to day and some of the show stuff, but that's me. But CM Punk is fed up with, it sounds like, pretty much everything. And now the rumor is out there. And I say rumor because we don't know when we're getting worked and when it's a shoot. And when it's a shoot, it means somebody's going out there and saying what they really think of everybody back in the locker room. And they don't care who they're making mad, which sounds like CM Punk. Or a work is basically going out there and saying the exact same things, but everybody in the locker room knew you were going to say it beforehand, and it's cool. Whatever, it's fine. It doesn't mean that you mean it either. So, or there's some kernel of truth, but you're not like nearly as angry as you're making it sound. So there's a big difference between a work and a shoot, and sometimes you can get together and say, "Hey, we're going to do this promo," and then the guy goes out and does the promo, and he says or does something he's not supposed to do or didn't clear with the other guy, and then it becomes this big thing. And that's been happening in AEW as well. So WWE's problem had always been that promos were overly scripted. I think what we're starting to see with AEW is what happens when there's not that process to clear things. Like when I hear that Sammy Guevara says something about Eddie Kingston that makes Eddie Kingston mad. Okay, I understand the wrestlers going back and forth, but there should be somebody else there. There should be a third party that's saying, okay, Sammy, so you're going out in the switch, you're going to say, Eddie, you're cool with that, good. So you have a third party that can say, hey, Eddie, you were fine with it before Sammy went out there. Or, Sammy, you went out there and you said something about Eddie's weight that, Eddie wasn't cool with. Have that go between, right? So with Vince McMahon, things were overly scripted in WWE. What we're already seeing since Triple H took over, it feels like it's not scripted anymore. Or that it is, but they're being scripted in a way that it used to be. It used to be, all right, go out there and hit these points. This is what we want you to do. And so a wrestler would go out to the ring, he would hit those points, but he had plenty of freedom to say other things, say whatever he wanted, do it in his character, do it with his own verbiage, and it just sounds more natural, right, than being given every single line and having to memorize a script. Because it'll sound like, okay, what was my next line? Right. And you can watch as wrestlers sometimes lose their lines, which is sad because it's a show about fighting, so it really shouldn't have nearly as much script in it as sometimes WWE does. So what we're seeing now is WWE is becoming a more attractive place for wrestlers to go because of the fact Triple H is in charge. Now we'll go back to CM Punk. CM Punk, not a big fan of Triple H. So when he says last night, hey, the grass isn't greener on the other side, the grass is green wherever you water it, he's right. He's right, and on some level, it doesn't necessarily mean that if the rumors of Malachi Black not being happy in AEW and wanting to potentially go back to WWE are true, it doesn't mean that Malachi doesn't have a point. Malachi Black was used very, very well in NXT. And when he moved up to the main roster, I don't think that did him any favors. As soon as he got to the main roster, my first thought was, okay, so Vince doesn't know what to do with him. Because immediately his entrance to the ring changed, which is too bad because he had one of the most badass entrances in wrestling. And so they changed that. That's too much. No, we're going to change that. And so they took some of that character's mystery away, for lack of a better term. Well, what's happening in AEW is, I mean, I've noticed Malachi Black's not being utilized, but again, I think there's too many main eventers right now in AEW. The problem is for CM Punk to go out there and basically just, light the fuse and throw the bomb and then just, well, I did that. CM Punk is if this is not a work, and again, that's an if this is not a work, is potentially alienating guys like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. And we can debate the Young Bucks. I know there are people who think that the Young Bucks are overrated. And I will agree on some level, yes. I do think that the Young Bucks, their standing in wrestling is really, I mean, it is up in the air as to whether or not you think they're one of the best of all time or not. I know that with the Young Bucks, if they'd gone to WWE, I think because they're smaller wrestlers, I don't think they would have gotten over, and I don't think Vince would have put them over. And so I think them not being in WWE at any point has been good for them, because I think if they'd gone to WWE, they would have got squashed by a team like the Viking Raiders. I just don't see WWE at that time, and I'm talking before they were in AEW, before AEW was a thing. I can't see them excelling in WWE with the way that their product was geared towards the bigger guys being the better wrestlers. Which, and there are people who will say, well, that's accurate. The bigger wrestler would be able to beat up the smaller wrestler. Not always. It's just not always the thing. And I always go back to when UFC had David versus Goliath. These big, meaty guys against smaller, wiry, still pretty built guys. And the smaller guys did pretty well because they had speed. And if you're a smaller guy, you're used to fighting guys bigger than you. If you're a bigger guy, you may not be used to fighting guys smaller than you. So it really is, one of those things. And so I just look at what's going on in AEW right now, and CM Punk taking shots at, it just kept saying the EVPs. Well, we all know who the EVPs are. Your executive vice presidents are Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Adam Page, right? Although I don't know that Adam Page has that title officially. I don't think he does, but he took shots at Adam Page anyways, right? So Adam Page is a guy that they had him win the title. I didn't think they did a very good job with him as champ. I thought they could have built Hangman up so high, and they really didn't. So they're not having the same problem WCW had, but I can understand why people see the parallels between AEW and WCW, because WCW would start to build a guy up, and then in would come a WWF guy, WWF at the time mostly, and okay, we're going to shove you aside because look, we got Brutus Beefcake. We can't call him that because that's the name WWE gave him, but we've got Brutus, and the rest of us would go, seriously, Brutus Beefcake's going over this guy? Really? You built him up for this? And I think AEW has suffered from that as well on some level. I think it gets overblown. I think it gets overblown for the same reason that when you look at all the champions in WWE, you don't roll your eyes and say, well, these are all guys who were champs in ROH. And yet there's been times in WWE where there's a lot of guys who are former ROH guys who have belts. So then when I see AEW complaints of, well, it's just WWE guys with titles. Yeah, but guys move around from company to company. I don't think if Cody Rhodes wins the title when he comes back, people are going to go, well, of course, it's an AEW guy. Why wouldn't they put him over? They're just going to say, well, he's a former WWF guy, so really, or WWE, really. He was not WWF. Not old enough, I don't think, to have been around when WWF was still WWF. And then, of course, the Panda Company said you can't call yourself WWF, and we're stuck with WWE. And as soon as the entertainment went in there, that was Vince's excuse to say, well, we can just get wrestling out of the whole TV thing, right? We can stop calling them wrestlers. What does the second W stand for, Vince? You're fired. Okay, so I can't prove that conversation ever happened, but it could have. So where's CM Punk's at right now? He's got the belt, right? Clearly, Tony Khan has seen some pretty cool events in terms of their attendance with CM Punk. People will always talk about him. It is an immediate draw, whether you love or hate the wrestler. And it doesn't matter. And it's something that's like these trolls that go into the AEW live streams, and they just troll constantly, and they're just spam the chat. Well, if you set up your live stream so that the chat doesn't show up next to the replay. So when your live stream becomes video, yeah, so they've disrupted the live stream. They haven't disrupted anything after. All they've done is they've driven up your numbers. They've made it so you've had more viewers on your live stream. You've had more interaction on your live stream. All YouTube's algorithm and all that other fun stuff cares about. All it cares about is engagement. Does your video produce engagement? And if the answer is yes, well, they're pretty happy. And I mean, it could be negative engagement, but if ads are being watched, if the watch time is there for that video, yeah, they're pretty cool with it. And obviously, there might be some exceptions out there, but in general, yeah, they're pretty cool with it. And that's the thing. Your negative engagement is still engagement, and it comes back to the idea that no advertising is bad advertising, right? Which absolutely it can be. There can be, but I don't know how this is going to end with CM Punk. Tony Khan would be okay. So let's just say this is not a work, that it's a shoot, and CM Punk just went out there and threw everybody under the bus, right? Now, if you want to be a cynic, you could look at this and say, from a cynical point of view, you know what? Maybe Tony Khan is tired of paying these guys so much money and not thinking he's getting a return on that money. So maybe Tony Khan is perfectly fine with CM Punk over here saying all these things because he can't say them, right? So there's that side of it too. If you want to be really cynical and really like, you know what, I'll bet you Tony Khan feels this way too. All right, so you can go that route. But, I'm torn on this because while I think Kenny Omega's a great wrestler, Adam Page is an excellent wrestler, and I enjoy watching the Young Bucks fight, if those four guys collectively left, you still have an absolutely packed roster on AEW. Yes, the Elite then shows up in WWE. You'd have Triple H meeting them outside of whatever AEW venue they were exiting with their bags and helping them pack them into the limo and taking pictures for Instagram and Facebook and Twitter of, hey, so I picked up the Elite, where should I take them? It would be a huge coup for the WWE to get them. But I don't think it cripples AEW. AEW is still a company that's making money. AEW is still a company that is doing pretty well. And whether Tony Khan saying they're going to make $100 million is overshooting or not, the reality is that there's a lot of money to go around. There is definitely a lot of interest in wrestling right now at a level that is nowhere near the late 90s, but I think is higher than it was, I'd say, about 5-10 years ago. I think having two healthy wrestling companies makes for a much better product. I'm talking about two healthy companies in North America. Okay, in the U.S., because AAA in Mexico does pretty well as well. Not in that same range, but there are some Mexican promotions that do pretty well for themselves, and of course in Japan, you have some pretty darn solid promotions in terms of making money. I would think that if this was real, though, if CM Punk went out there and he shot, and if Tony Khan was really upset about it, we would see CM Punk let go. Taken out of his contract, whatever that might entail, if they'd have to do like some sort of a buyout or just straight out release. I'm not sure if AEW contracts work differently in WWE. They might. Of course, WWE contracts, you basically, at any point in time, they can just show you the door and you're gone. I don't know that AEW has that same ability. If you ask for your release, that's something different. But, I'm interested to see where this goes. The one thing that makes me think this is probably a shoot is that we're not seeing CM Punk say things and then Adam Page come out and challenge him. So to me, if it's at a media thing and CM Punk's talking like this, and if it was a work, I would expect Adam Page to come out during that and say, why don't you say it to my face, and them getting up in each other's face. Somebody getting in between, where there's Tony or whoever getting in between them, or some security guys. And then, this big thing right in front of the media. Now, the rumor that there was an altercation backstage after that, and we didn't see it, tells me, it just on the surface of it, it says shoot. But of course, this is where you get into Princess Bride territory with the iocane powder, where I start talking in circles of, yes, but they would know that I would know that that's how a shoot would work. So they would make it look like that it was a shoot when it's a work. But I know. So if I know, but then they would know that I would know. So that's where we're at with the wrestling community. I do find it funny because people are debating this like we have any idea. And the one part that I find funny too is that some of the same people will say, well, you can't trust the dirt sheets. Will then say, this guy's an absolute prick. Well, just read up online. You can tell. And what they're talking about is stuff from the dirt sheets. So you either believe them or you don't. I sometimes do, sometimes don't. There are times where they're proven completely wrong. But in this case, CM Punk has been known to piss people off. It's just how he works. It's who he is. He'll tell you what he really thinks of you. And people don't like that. They generally don't like being told what you really think of them. But let me know your thoughts. So do you think CM Punk ends up facing anything from this? Do you think Tony Khan is seeing this as a way to get his executive vice presidents out of there? What do you think is going to happen with this? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.